Hello, everyone to Forest Focus. You might remember on yesterday's podcast when I said Nottingham Forest have to deal with the realities of PSR and they can't rely on John Textor and Lyon to keep buying squad players and fending off big sales. Well, not for the first time. It looks like I was totally wrong, as Danilo is reportedly set to join the French club for £21 million. And there's tentative talk Matt Turner could join them too. So joining me to discuss all that and give us his take on the three Botafogo players who could join Forest is a friend of the show, a Forest fan, and the man behind the Copa Club in Nathan Joyce. Morning, Nathan. Good to have you back. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you. How are you, Matt?
Good. We are going to plow through lots of stuff. I've got another podcast recording with Fletch in 50 minutes. So we're going to rattle through lots of good stuff with Nathan as ever. And we'll start with Danilo. French outlets, British outlets, and Fabrizio Romano reporting that he's close to joining Lyon. Same footsteps as Moussa Niakate or Mangala, this time for 21 million. And my back of a fag packet maths works out that would be about 10 to 11 million pounds of PSR profit. But we will find out because Lyon's ownership structure means they have to declare the exact fees down the road, as they did with Niakate and Mangala. And they were very big. And I think it would take total spending to over 80 million, close to 90 million, which is pretty crazy. Good timing to have you on, Nathan, as a South American football expert and a Forest fan, so you can speak with both hats on. What's your general thoughts on Danilo potentially leaving Forest for Lyon?
Forest hat on, I'm a little bit disappointed. I think if we rewind to the start of the season, everyone was so excited to see Danilo. Obviously, he started in that first game before that horrific injury. And I think it's very much a case of what could have been for him. I think the way in which he transitioned to English football in that first season for us. I think that's why teams like Arsenal were interested and other teams have been sniffing around. And I think it is just that case of what could have been for him. I'm a huge Danilo fan. I think from watching him in Brazil, he was very much a number 6 defensive midfielder. And the way in which he's then stepped up to the Premier League and then operated in a number 8 role, and he's been tasked with a few different positions for Forest while he tried to find his feet. But I think he was only in the country a week before he was Bournemouth away in the depths of winter, and he adapted very, very well. So it's a real shame. I think that injury has knocked him back, but if he can go and have a challenge elsewhere and succeed in Europe, fair play to him. But for me, it's a little bit a case. I'm disappointed to see him go, but not entirely surprised.
Yeah. I mean, we'll always have that purple patch in 2023, wasn't it? When he scored against Brighton, Southampton, my favourite ever Forest commentary for Seb Hutchinson's goal, and he scored Brentford away as well. So he has certainly been a good player for us. What do you think about the fee? We obviously referenced some funky deals, potentially, back scratching deals, arguably with Lyon previously. This 21 million quid, is that inflated or slightly inflated, or about right for you?
I would say it was about right because he was brought in, if I believe it was around 16 million on, was it a 4 or 5 year deal? So quite a big contract. So if he hadn't had that injury, and I think he had last season as the expectations, which we all thought of him, then we would be probably being like 20, 21 million. That should be double the price. But considering the season he's had, what's happened where Forest have sort of flourished and moved away from being relegation candidates to now European side, I think when you're trying to get back on the pitch and pick up where you've left off from after such a horrific injury, it's sometimes really difficult with players in and around you who are improving. And Forest went from 17th to 7th very quickly, and then he was playing catch up, and I think he put him in a really difficult position. And I still don't exactly know where he will flourish long term, if he's a 6 or an 8, because he didn't score goals at all in Brazil, and then he scored a fair few for Forest, didn't he? So I think it's a fair deal. All things considered, I think it's just ended on a little bit of a sour note, because off the pitch, everyone seems to like Danilo, and he seems a good character around the squad.
Last one on Danilo. He feels to me like the kind of player in 2 or 3 years could be worth 50, 60 million. Or he could be back in Brazil trying to rebuild his career just because of, you referenced the injuries and everything. Is that a fair assessment? Or do you think he'll definitely make it long term?
I think he can definitely stay in Europe. If he was to go back to Brazil, now would probably be the time, because Palmeiras have got a lot of money and they've been spending a lot more than 20 million on players. So there were tentative links, potentially lazy ones. I didn't see or hear anything from my side. I don't think he will be going back to Brazil, and whatever is happening with this relationship with Lyon, it's still good to see that he wants to challenge himself in Europe, and he's going to be playing on a European stage with them as well. So like, hopefully, like in some sort of capacity, Danilo can get back to his best, and hopefully we get to see the player which we saw in 2023.
Hello, small random interjection at this point in the conversation. We recorded this a few hours ago and just preparing to edit it and put it back out, and saw a report on the Nottingham Post website quoting DS Sports Radio, an Argentinian outlet, talking about Nicolas Dominguez, saying that he has suffered a serious meniscus injury in his left leg. So that's a knee injury, I think. He's had an operation, as we mentioned yesterday, and we'll talk about subsequently with Nathan very briefly. And sadly, it looks like he says he faces at least 4 months on the sidelines, which would put him out to around October. So he'll miss a good chunk of the start next season. And obviously, it takes time for players to get back. So big shame for Dominguez if that report is correct. So no reason to think otherwise. So I'll drop this in and we'll get back to the conversation with Nathan on Dominguez and everything else we discussed today. Hope you enjoy. Let's just stick with Forest's midfield, actually, because it kind of links in fairly nicely. Nico Dominguez was supposed to be in the Argentina squad. Sadly, he's not. He posted the photo, you might have seen it on Instagram, with the knee brace on and his leg bandage saying time to recover, which suggests he's had surgery, and that's what people are saying. I did ask Forest if there was any kind of update they could offer, and they said there wasn't, unfortunately. So people will speculate either he's fine, or more likely to me, he's had surgery and he's probably going to be out for a good while if it's knee or ankle surgery, but we don't know. So we'd be speculating, and people can draw their own conclusions. And I suspect there will be updates emerging generally. I don't know if you've heard anything from the Argentina, because he was in that squad. So do update us if you have. But otherwise, in general, that probably lends us to think maybe Forest buy a midfielder with your fan hat on, Mateus Fernandes or someone like that.
I mean, potentially. I mean, if Danilo's going and Dominguez may or may not be out for a while, but I think it's just a real shame because he's missed out on the last 2 or 3 Argentinian squads. And he's probably deserved to at least been in and around the camp. And then he's finally got his opportunity. And looking at the squad, he was probably going to get some minutes in these next couple of fixtures, especially with the position Argentina are in. So from that point of view, it's a real shame. And from a Forest point of view, I just really hope it's not long term. But excuse me, I don't really hope it's not long term. And when the club maybe don't want to comment on it, people are always going to fear the worst. But we'll try and be a bit more upbeat about it. We don't need him for a couple of months just yet.
Yeah, hopefully so. Hopefully so. One other bit of Forest transfers out that I should have mentioned and asked Nathan, mentioned in my notes to Nathan, but I didn't. Ramon Sosa potentially going back to Palmeiras. Seems like it's been quite strongly spoken about in South American media. I don't know if you're been following that or not, but thoughts on that one?
Yeah, there's been lots of links, and I think it's you need to point out the fact that not every South American player will make it. And I think the fact that I touched on it or alluded to it there with Danilo in terms of that huge jump even from relegation candidates to them fighting for European spots. I think we brought Ramon Sosa in and we didn't think we were going to necessarily be that team. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, and obviously I'm not there at training every day, but Ramon Sosa was the standout player in Argentina and there was lots to get excited about. But it hasn't worked out for him. I think a move across to Brazil, Palmeiras' project, is incredibly exciting. I definitely urge people to watch them at the Club World Cup. I think they may surprise a few people. They're spending a lot of money trying to round up the best South Americans from across the globe, and I think Sosa will be a nice fit for them. So, yeah, it's not worked out at Forest. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I think this is the risk when you go into this market, but it's a lot cheaper than putting your fishing rod pole in the European one. So, yeah, it's a shame. I don't know why it's not worked out. It just really hasn't had the minutes to sort of give me a complete overview, unfortunately.
We'll come on to the South American market and transfer fees, obviously, when we talk about the 3 Botafogo lads. Before that, just box off a couple of other things. I did say at the top there about Matt Turner tentatively linked. That just came from a Lyon YouTuber called Serious Charlie, who said that we're in Palace. We're looking to sell him to Lyon after his loan spell at Palace, which have lots of connections with John Textor, which we'll come on to. So we'll follow that one, but I thought I'd mention it because it would be insane if Lyon spent any kind of money of note on Matt Turner after the stint he's had at Forest and playing second fiddle at Palace. Then, or people would be looking, if they're not already, at this kind of.
That's when eyebrows are going to be raised a little bit, aren't they? For sure.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think the Danilo deal's legit and certainly helpful. Let's talk a bit more about John Textor, Lyon, Botafogo, especially Botafogo with Nathan's hat on. I was doing some research. Lyon fans seem pretty narks about how everything's going. It seems like there's a bit of a mess there. There's a provisional relegation, a transfer embargo that seems like it's been lifted, obviously, if they're going to sign Danilo. From the Botafogo end of it, how's that project working out? They've won trophies, but it seems like maybe things aren't all well there. Is that fair? How would you assess the whole situation?
Yeah, Botafogo fans aren't happy either. This is the complications around multi-club ownership. Botafogo, yes, won the Libertadores for the first time last season, won the Brazilian League for the first time since 1995, but it's a lot of short-term vision with Botafogo. The idea of, for example, they brought in Luis Enrique from Real Betis for 20 million and was sent to Botafogo with the idea of potentially going to Lyon afterwards, which is sort of the knock-on effect. So Botafogo fans are always happy to see big players arrive, and obviously he was one of their standout players last season. But because they need money, he was sold to Russia and ended up going to Zenit for 35 million. But that 15 million euro profit, or however much it ends up being, goes in Lyon's back pocket because they're the club who need the finances more than Botafogo, to say. So Botafogo, they're always a club who are trying to improve, and they are spending money. Don't get me wrong, John Textor has brought in a couple of really good players for Botafogo this year, but they're all under 10 million euros for a European audience. That doesn't sound like a lot of money. For Brazil, it is. But then the players, the big superstars who they're bringing over to dip their toes in to play for Botafogo, is always the idea to bring them to Lyon or sell them to another European club if they exceed expectations. And that money seems to be going into Lyon's back pockets. But there's so many complications around where Lyon are at the moment. So Lyon fans aren't happy, Botafogo fans aren't happy, and players are being sold left, right, and centre. So it gives an advantage to a club like Forest, as we'll get to talk about. But no one appears to be happy at the moment. So it's out of sight, out of mind. Botafogo were great last season, but so many players have come and gone since, and a few more are set to leave this summer. So where does it end? How did Botafogo improve? How do they become one of the best clubs in Brazil? It almost seems impossible if players keep leaving. And then, yeah, as you said, Lyon fans aren't happy either. So I think it just goes to show this multi-club ownership. It seems glamorous. It seems like a good idea, and it can work. But there's also a lot of complications if finances with a certain club start to tank.
We'll talk more. We'll get into the players that Nathan mentioned shortly. Just the final bit of box ticking I'm wanting to do before the main reason I got Nathan on, just to reference reports that Palace have their Europa League places in jeopardy. Again, some multi-club ownership, and again, it involves John Textor, who owns Lyon, who are in the same comp. He owns 48, or Eagle Football Holdings own 48% of Palace, but they have a 25% voting share. I don't understand all this, but they've got to talk to UEFA, and it could see them kicked out of Europe altogether because a different Palace stakeholder owns a stake in a Danish club or in the Conference League. Anyway, that would mean that Forest take the Europa League spot. I initially dismissed it because of what Forest were going to do with blind trusts, but just reading up on it a little bit, Stefan Borson, who's regularly on TalkSport, noted that Eagle Football Holdings are trying to buy a bigger stake in Palace and effectively take control, and that complicates things. And unless they pause that, then maybe they do get kicked out. It still feels unlikely to me. One quick question, fan hat on. How would you feel if we took Palace's spot? Would it be bittersweet or just sweet?
Oh, it'd be so sweet, wouldn't it? It'd be so funny. But then think about all the stress we went through over the last few weeks of the season, and then the disappointment, and then a week or two later to end up in the Europa. It would be very interesting to see. But look, we're in the Conference League. Let's focus on that for now. And then if anything else falls our way, take it with both hands.
Yeah, I think so. And we probably won't know, just on that, we probably won't know for 2 weeks or something like that, which comp Palace are actually going to be in, if any. I suspect it'll all blow over because they make these things go away, football clubs. But yeah, we'll keep tabs on it, obviously. Right, we'll get into the 3 players that I really wanted to get Nathan's thoughts on. Just before that, a word for the Trent Nav. Andorra v England, you can watch it this Saturday, 5 p.m. At the Nav, the usual big screens indoors and outdoors. Also, England v Senegal at the City Ground, of course. On Tuesday, there's a pre-match party. Fothers is there with his quiz. And then if you don't have tickets, you can watch the game there. So enjoy the international break at the Nav. Right, let's get into it then with the 3 Botafogo players. We'll just go through them one by one because I really want to get Nathan's thoughts on them. Been reading about them a lot. We did a discussion yesterday, me, Temps and Pete, where we talked about it with pretty limited knowledge, to be honest, and just in general principles. So we should really get into some specifics. Which player do you want to kick off with? I'll give you the choice.
Oh, how lovely. We'll go from front to back, but we'll start on the left side. So we'll go with Cuiabano, if that's all right. We'll start with Cuiabano, work our way across, and then we'll finish with Igor Jesus. So Cuiabano, very interesting profile. What I like about Cuiabano is that he can play across multiple positions. He can operate as a left back, left wing back, operating as that left winger in a 4-2-3-1 formation for Botafogo this season. And he just fits a European profile. Obviously, everybody listening to this will know that Brighton had a couple of offers not back for him. So again, Forest fishing in the right pool. Fenerbahce were interested in January. I don't know if that devalues the statement I've just said about Brighton a little bit. But a player who's last season it was a squad player last season because he was seen almost as a left back by the previous manager, Alex Tellez, who former Man United left back, that's his position. But Cuiabano started slowly moving into the left wing back role. Obviously, so many games in Brazil over the season, every 3 to 4 days towards the last few months. It's crazy. But Cuiabano started getting an opportunity further up the pitch, and he's flourished. Botafogo have looked very strong in the last few weeks, definitely improved. They changed managers, so there was complications around the squad, who was being played at the start. But Cuiabano is a profile which could fit the Premier League or European football long term. I'm trying to think about which all three going into the Forest squad at once doesn't make complete sense to me. So maybe Cuiabano is the one who's potentially loaned out, only because he was the squad player last season, but he is featuring heavily this time round. And what I really like about his game is because he's been brought up or was learning his trade as a left back, as he's advanced up the pitch, his high press is unbelievable. And I think that's maybe where Ramon Sosa struggled with Forest, because he couldn't have that defensive responsibilities and never really did anyway. But Cuiabano has that. And I think in the Premier League, look at Forest. Take example, that West Ham game, which we won towards the end of the season. Forest needed to have players knowing when to press and win the ball back and counteract it. And Cuiabano has done that time and time again for Botafogo. He's quick. He's powerful. It's not too bad technically either, but since he's advanced into this higher role, when he's got into a few shooting positions in and around the 6-yard box, inside the box, he's sort of made a few errors, but he's still learning his trade in that position. But arguably from 20, 30 yards, he's better. He has scored 2 or 3 absolute rockets in the last 18 months. But I think, again, that just shows his power, his confidence, willing to get down the line, work for the left back, really strong at crossing as well. Maybe he tries it too often, but it's good to know that he's not trying to do too much. But fairly old-fashioned in the sense that he's a winger who, well, I say winger now, but he's been a winger this season who wants to get at the fullback, which is quite rare in the modern game. So hopefully that's not taken away from him if he does come to the Premier League. I'm sure it won't. But just, I think, a raw profile, and it's good to see Forest identifying talent where they can operate in multiple positions rather than having to buy 2 or 3 players and sort of figure out where they go. So, yeah, I'm not 100% sure if he would go straight into that Forest team, but the profile is very promising. And yeah, I do like this one. And I think the fact that Brighton were after him as well sort of strengthens what I'm trying to say about him.
I did. I recorded yesterday, come out later in the week with an Olympiacos podcast, and he was discussing their manager plays a very high press, aggressive press, and that I read a tweet of yours about Cuiabano, and it pricked my ears up a bit. That maybe is the one that goes on loan. I think it'd be about a £10 million fee. And I'll ask you this question about all three, because it's probably the big question. In terms of ability, would you say he's Premier League squad ready, Premier League first team ready, which it doesn't sound like it, or actually needs a loan, in your opinion?
I wouldn't say he's desperately crying out for a loan, but from what I've seen in terms of like where do Forest envision him playing long term, it'd be nice to see what you've just reacting to what you've just said about Olympiacos. If he is seen to be playing more as a left winger long term, then a season in Greece playing in that particular role will just benefit him, and it's another way of being able to see how he will develop long term in the Premier League. Sometimes just squeezing players in from the beginning can have negative implications. The idea of Brighton's model is to buy a player, loan him to one of the club in Belgium, I've forgotten who it is at this moment in time, see how they get on there, progress, and then come back to the Premier League, that extra 10-15% ready before fans then start jumping on their back if they're not performing within that first 5-10 games. So I think it'll benefit him long term. He's still only 22. I think there's always this high pressure for by 22 you need to be the finished article, and obviously we'll talk about Igor Jesus later, who's even older, but he's still 22. A season in Europe, if he develops with Olympiacos, then he could go straight into Forest team the season afterwards. So that's not me necessarily giving it the rubber stamp and shipping him off to Greece, but I think he would be the one out of the three who would want to see progress a little bit more before getting into that Forest first team.
It is funny with Brighton. They'll start the season and they'll have some random midfielder or winger that I've never heard of, and the matchday commentator will say, "Oh, signed from X for 10 million. He's just come back from a season in Belgium with, I think it's St. Troy de Twinden or something like that." And like, oh, and then he's brilliant. But I've never heard of him for a year. So
I think it works though. Like, I think it's beneficial for them to be out of the spotlight, learn a European game where it's still going to be physical, like the technical side of it. Belgium's a growing league as well, so that works for Brighton. So there's no reason why it couldn't work for Forest. So instead of fans necessarily always getting really excited about them coming straight in because they're Brazilian, because they're South American, let them develop for a season out of the spotlight and then see how they can perform even better if they succeed in Europe.
I just Googled who it was because it was going to bug me if I didn't get it right. It's Union St. Galles, if that's how you say it. Yeah. So that's the one. That's right. Shall we move on? And if so, to which player next out of the two?
We'll sidestep across and we'll go to Jair Cunha. Arguably the most exciting out of the trio. I really like him, really like his profile. I think it's another sort of potential masterclass from Nottingham Forest. Obviously, everyone got very excited about Murillo, and I think the questions have always been put to me on every single podcast or radio show I've been on since, being like, who's the next Murillo? Where's he from? Now, a different style of player, but he's the next centre-back to get excited about, and he's only played 10-12 games this season. It's 10 in the league, and he's kept 6 clean sheets. He's been a huge part of that. Barbosa, who was Botafogo starting centre-back, got a nasty injury 2 months ago, and Jair was brought in, and I think he's going to be one of the first names on the team sheet ever since. Now, Textor was very keen to sign Jair from Santos. And if we look at Santos's academy over the years, well, I could start with Pele, Neymar, Rodrigo, Marcos Leonardo, who some listeners may be aware of, who was linked with Forest previously. Some big names, one of the best academies in Brazil, and that's where Jair was learn his trade. And the Botafogo put in so many different offers to try and sign him, player swaps, and ended up bringing him across for 12 million euros plus one of their key players last season, Tiquinho Suarez. So it was around a 16 million deal. And I think that was the idea, to eventually ship him off to Lyon, or that was the promise. And I think you spoke to Pedro from Glorious Botafogo, and he said that he sees him as a long-term Brazilian centre-back. And I'd probably have to agree with him if I was a gun was put to my head for a long-term projection. But for 6'6", the way he's so technical, comfortable with both feet, like just his reading of the game, knowing when to press, knowing when to keep his shape. But like I said, he's kept 6 clean sheets for Botafogo in his first 10 matches. And Botafogo were really struggling at the start of the season to work out where they moved under a new head coach. And for a 20-year-old to come into that back line where it could have gone either way for Botafogo, and he's steadied the ship, it's been very impressive. So I'm not wanting to oversell him. I feel like I'm a bit conscious of doing that. It worked out very well when I spoke highly of Murillo, but he is one to definitely get excited about. Can be a little bit rash. I think a lot of when when players are linked or signed, people will look at their last game, and midweek he did get sent off in the Libertadores and almost cost Botafogo a place in the round of 16 for the Libertadores. Ball just got away from him, and I think he was just so passionate to win it back and make up for that mistake. It was just a rash decision which went to VAR, and unfortunately he was sent off for it. So there are areas to improve for his game, but if we look at his profile as a whole, I mean, Forest have identified another really top centre back in Brazil, and I think this is the standout signing out of all three of them. I really do.
Couple of follow-ups on him. I think I read it in a piece you wrote initially about the Lyon connection, and he was supposed to go there. I guess this is a money thing, and they need the cash, and that's why he's not going there, isn't it?
I think so. If I'm reading between the lines, it's similar to the Luis Enrique deal. They signed him for Botafogo for 20 million, and the idea was for him to then go to Lyon long term. And I think maybe money was moved, but they ended up selling him to Zenit, which was a real curveball. But again, they needed the profit, or wanted the profit at least. So I think that is the case. That's the idea of like Textor wanted to bring in Jair. Textor wants to bring in younger, promising players to move them across to Lyon or sell them for a profit. I think it was very much at first. Plan A is always Lyon, but with the finances at the moment, plan B is let's make some sort of profit, but promise these players that Europe will be an option for them if they come in and they try and achieve success with Botafogo in the interim.
I'm not seeing a fee reported for him. I don't know if you have you?
I haven't either. I've not really seen, I've only seen really Igor Jesus' fee, which has been around 16, 18, but the rest, because it's not a package deal, I think because it's three, I think Forest fans or people, definitely me as well, thinking, well, what is the fee going to be overall? But it's going to be individual fees. So I haven't seen anything concrete, so I don't really want to talk about anything just yet, but I'd be surprised if it's anything less than 15, 20, considering they only paid 12 million for him a matter of months ago.
Yeah. Looking at YouTube highlights can always be deceptive, but he looks like a Milenkovic type with a touch of Murillo in terms of being good on the ball, can pick a pass. How would you sum him up in terms of style of defender?
Yeah, it seems a nice blend. He's obviously 6'6", so he's obviously very good at winning the ball in the air. And I think that's what people will maybe have that link with Milenkovic, but he's very good with ground duels as well. I think I included it within the article I wrote for the Copa Club, but really similar figures to Vitor Reis, who just moved across to Manchester City and was probably the centre-back to be keeping an eye on in Brazil prior to now. We're talking about Jair Cunha, but really good with his feet, really good in the air. So it seems to be a nice blend. I think he would probably go in as third centre-back. I'm not sure that I would want to see him loaned out, but it's really difficult because he's a player. He's 20. I'd rather see him getting minutes. You're not going to drop Milenkovic. You're not going to drop Murillo. When Murillo was signed, it was a case of getting in front of Scott McKenna and Joe Worrell, where there was an easier door open, where now there probably isn't. So it'd be really interesting. I'd definitely rate him over anybody else within the Forest squad. So he would go in as best of the rest for now, but it's going to be a case of, is he going to get time? If not, does he go on loan? But now Forest have the Conference League as well, so it'd be good to see him get an opportunity, and it also gives you that flexibility, I guess, if Forest want to ever look at going at three at the back as well. So I think there's lots to think about, but I will say that it's definitely the most exciting of the three.
Yeah, I do wonder if he or Morato ends up out on loan next season. One of them. I wouldn't give up on Morato. Yeah, I wouldn't give up on him yet. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
No, for sure.
Just before we come to Igor Jesus, a quick word for Vesta Blinds. If you're looking for new blinds, shutters made to measure in the East Mids, do check them out, vestablinds.com. Number is on the screen and it's info@vestablinds.com. And I'll put the link in the description as well. But thanks as ever for their support. And they've signed up for a longer stay with us, which is great. So really appreciate that. And their support from James, who's a big Forest fan, like practically everyone who advertises on this show, which is lovely. Right. Tell us about Igor Jesus, what you make of him and his level in terms of Premier League compatibility at the moment.
Yeah, I'm smiling because he's certainly divided opinion on social media from people who have just seen a few clips of him, people who want to look at his goals, assists, records. Well, I think it's something you have to take with a pinch of salt. And I'm the first to admit, I don't think he's world class at all. Like, I think people will look at it either way in terms of they'll get excited about him because he's a Brazilian young striker coming across, one of the best in Brazil at the moment. And then I can see other people turn around and be like, well, look at his goals and assists, as I've just pointed out, and they're not that great. I like him. I don't think that you would get somebody of that ability for 16 to 18 million pounds in Europe. You have to sometimes take these calculated risks. And I don't want to start talking about PSR, etc. But like that all comes into play, unfortunately, with transfers now. And you can't argue that Igor Jesus is probably one of, if not the best young striker in Brazil at the moment. Now, there's a few reasons for why his goals and assists aren't at the peak people will probably expect, because I've seen comments saying that Igor Jesus needs to have 15, 20 goals in Brazil's top flight in order to work out in the Premier League, but it's just not his profile. Last season for Botafogo, Arthur Jorge, who was the manager, lined up with 4 or 5 players in that front line, and it was Igor Jesus' job to, yes, he was the sole number 9, but to bring in players like Thiago Almada, Luis Enrique into play, and that's why goals were very much spread around that team. They won the South American double, so to speak, and nobody scored more than 6-7 goals within that team. Now, is that unsuccessful, or does that make you a bad player? Certainly not. He operates, I think Pedro said it to you on the other podcast, but he operates really well as a false 9, likes to drop deep. He can challenge and bully players. So that's a tick when it comes to playing in the Premier League. I think his best attribute has to be his movement inside the box. The way in which he can get in front of a defender, glancing headers have almost become his trademark finish. He never really thumps them home. So aerially, I think he'll be a huge threat. And the way in which he drops deep, can hold the ball up and bring in wingers. Now, surely that slots perfectly into what Nuno wants to achieve with Forest. So having a player who can hold it up and bring others into play is a really smart addition. Yes, he's not going to be your striker who will score 10, 15, 20 goals. But his rise from UAE to the Premier League now is an opportunity he's carved out for himself, and he definitely deserves that. Yes, it's easy to put compilations together of him taking long, wild shots at the start of the season, and sometimes his decision-making can be improved. But Botafogo were a car crash at the start of the season. Once Arthur Jorge left and they didn't have a manager, and if you look at his record, he only scored 1 goal in maybe the 8 or 9 games at the start of the season, but that was a State Cup, which they don't really care about. So you can automatically take those out where he's played 10, 20, 30 minutes, because the players are just using it to get fit, ready for the start of the season. And when he was brought in from UAE last year, Botafogo were going for 2 titles, a title they'd never won and a title they bottled massively the season before. The pressure was on, but Igor Jesus came in and did his job. His job wasn't to put the ball in the back of the net every single week. If he did, it was a bonus, but he was there to bring others into play, and he did it very, very well. Now, you can easily look at the appearances, again, like I said, to the goals and assists, but towards the end of the season, Botafogo were playing every 2-3 days, traveling, not even training anymore. The strain on your body, physically, mentally, and this is not me making excuses, like traveling across a big continent, playing in big games and trying to get over the line. Like in the Libertadores final, we didn't even get an opportunity because Botafogo went down to 10 men inside 20 seconds. So straight away, like, what is he meant to do in that particular game? But he held the ball up particularly well, brought in Luis Enrique, who got his goal and got man of the match. And Igor Jesus perfectly did his job without being in the spotlight or the limelight. So yes, I'll be the first to admit this isn't the flashiest Brazilian you'll see. He doesn't have that flair, okay? He's not the best with potentially getting the ball and traveling up the pitch, and not the fastest in that first few yards. But that's not playing to his strengths, right? We wouldn't be doing that with Chris Wood. So why, again, would you be doing it with Igor Jesus? He's carved out an opportunity. I know Tim Vickery has spoke highly of Igor Jesus for quite some time now. I'm probably a level or 2 down from where Tim's at. So people can either choose to side with Mr. South America or myself, the apprentice. But I do think he deserves the opportunity, and I can see why Forest have identified him, because he'll fit into Nuno's style of play if he's looking to replicate what was so successful for Forest last season. You're not going to go out and get a top world-class striker in today's market for 16, 18 million pounds anywhere in the world, but you are going to bring one who brings a lot of qualities, who will fight for the team. And yes, he's 24, but I don't think he's the finished product just yet. He's got into the Brazilian team, and another negative which can be thrown out is, well, the Brazilian team hasn't been doing great of lately, so everyone's getting an opportunity. And that's rubbish. That's not the case. Like, he earned his opportunity within the Brazilian team, and he scored on debut with a trademark glancing header. And I think that'll be invaluable to Forest if it works out for him. So I'm trying to be positive about all the signings, and I think there's a lot of positives for all of them, but I don't buy into how much negativity there's been around Igor Jesus without really understanding what kind of player he is. There's definitely areas to improve, but that's why he's going to a Premier League team, and the coaching staff will be able to hopefully get that out of him. But there's been a lot of noise in Brazil about him for a year or two, and a lot of Brazilians were happy for him to be into the national team. So I'm optimistic. I'm not here saying he's going to be Chris Wood-esque in terms of get 20 goals, but I think he has something to contribute. And hopefully, if he adapts to the European game, settles in England again, which is a huge part for all these players we're mentioning, then it can be a successful transfer. But for the fee, I don't see anyone else popping up with names for Europeans strikers at that price who have got a good record as well. So I think Forest are taking a gamble, especially, well, probably on all three of them are a gamble, but it seems to be a calculated one.
You've touched on both of my follow-up questions already, so I won't ask the Brazil squad one. I'll skip because you've answered that. I'll push you on the age a little bit. I think you've said on here before, or Brazilian clubs feel that once a player gets past either 22, 23, 24, it's, the boat's probably the ship sailed. Is there a reason why you think European clubs haven't gone there before? Is it because Micah Richards exploded on the scene more recently? What's happening there?
I think, would a Premier League club go fishing in a UAE pond? Probably not. The fact that and I think you can turn around and say credit to Botafogo to identifying a talent who could go up another level. He was scoring goals left, right, and centre in that league in the Middle East, as you would expect if he is going to take a step up. But Botafogo scouting, again, very solid. Over the last couple of years, they've identified a lot of talent, and they've sold and made a lot of money out of it. Whether that is with Lyon or not, we'll try and park that one. But for me, his rise has been very quick, but that's what seems to happen in the modern game now. I think maybe he didn't expect for Brazil's national team to be going through this period. Maybe he didn't expect to return to Brazil so quickly. Maybe he was happy in the Middle East, earning probably a good wage, but his game has drastically improved over the last 6 to 8 months. But the reason for that, he's been surrounded by good players. So I think if he comes into the Forest setup, again, if Forest dip their hand into the market, get a few more players, especially if Danilo goes, more creative players around him, if Gibbs White stays, etc., it could work out very well. So, again, without repeating myself, I'm quietly optimistic, and I think there's been too much negative chat around this before the deal's even been done.
Yeah, massively. We'll talk more about Gibbs White on tomorrow's podcast with Fletch. I'm starting to think maybe he'll stay, having spent weeks saying he'll go. But as I said right at the start of the show, often get things wrong. Really, you'll have to make this a short answer. Sorry, Nathan, because we've got to go in a minute. Just quickly, Murillo, I don't think he's in the latest national team squad. How are you viewing his international status right now?
It's going to be interesting. Obviously, Carlo Ancelotti is now in charge, and Marquinhos has come back from injury, who's the number one centre-back there. Leo Ortiz from Flamengo is very much trusted to be that squad player, which Murillo isn't at the moment. Bittersweet, the Argentinian game. What a way to make your debut, but it was a bit of a disaster for him, and maybe Carlo Ancelotti just wants to steady the ship for the first couple of games. So I don't think it's ruined his chances, but I can see why he hasn't been called up this time round.
Excellent. Lovely stuff. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe. Do consider membership of Patreon. If you're a member, you'll have had early access to this and any other pre-recorded interview or just a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Give us a plug for the Copper Club, if I can say that. I read your article yesterday, lots of good insight, probably touching on what we talked about today and expanding on it. So do give us a plug for your work.
Well, I think the main plug at the moment is the Club World Cup is around the corner, and we still have a fair few magazines. So we've produced a 31.5 team guide because Club Lyon got kicked out. But we'll go through all the teams. We speak about Jair, we speak about Igor Jesus within that. So we've identified talent across all the teams. 20 to 25 journalists have contributed. And if you use the code CWC, you get 10% off as well.
Wonderful. What a way to end. A nice sales pitch. Love it. Love it. Right. Thanks to Nathan. And we'll definitely have him back on either in this capacity or as he joins us in his full Forest fan hack capacity for match preview and stuff like that going through the season. So do stick with us for that and stick with us tomorrow for, as mentioned, the podcast with Fletch. In the meantime, do us a favor, hit like on this video. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.